Hello, I'm Lisa Bien. When I was a student here at Temple University, I struggled with deep-seated and troubling questions about my self-worth and abilities. I felt as if I wasn't enough, and I lived by this notion for years until one day a professor came into my life. She believed in me and helped me see the good inside. She encouraged me to realize my talents, chase my dreams, and live in the surety that I was and am more than enough, but beautiful and unique all on my own. Now, after years of struggle, therapy, and personal discovery and growth, I have bounced back into a person I am proud of. It's my passion and my goal to inspire young women and men to do the same, to teach young adults to stop listening to the negative messages that they create for themselves. I want all of you who are struggling through the same insecurities and streams of hopeless questioning as I did to realize who you truly are and believe that you are strong enough, smart enough, and good enough to bounce back from anything life throws at you. Let's get started. Today we will hear a story about bouncing back out of grief, trauma, and loss, which all of us have or will encounter at some point in our lives. Garden Wellington Logan never foresaw her life's unexpected twists and turns when she graduated from Temple University in 1994 with a degree in journalism. She recalls those early days of her young adulthood being full of promise and opportunity, and she was not prepared for the trauma that would befall her and her family 12 years down the road. Garden has learned to cope, live, and strengthen herself through tragedy that many experience but few ever speak of because of shame, confusion, and a sense of blame that persists without direction or resolve. Today, Garden joins us to share her story of bouncing back out of the deepest grief and to remind others out there who may be struggling that they are not alone and the help they so desperately seek is available. Let's hear from Garden.
Growing up, my brother William was my best friend, my confidant, and my connection to the rest of the universe. He was handsome, smart, funny, and successful. Everyone wanted to be around him. I have very few memories that don't include William, and I looked up to him with pride and adoration. On November 4th, 2006, my brother William Liberty Wellington died by suicide. He was 31 years old. While the loss of my brother is by far the most paralyzing trauma and shock I've ever experienced, I can sadly affirm that the saying is true: hindsight is 2020. The year leading up to William's death, there were plenty of warning signs: changes in his behavior and lifestyle. The healthy relationship with the love of his life deteriorated. He made some poor business decisions, and he shared with me that he was in pain, a deep and troubling pain that he could not explain. The day before he died, I told William I was making an appointment with him with a psychiatrist, and he willingly agreed. He told me everything would get better and that he loved me. In my ignorance, I believed him and thought that after I brought him a hot meal, cheered him up a day or two later, and got him talking to someone, we would really start to see some improvement. I did make that appointment. It was for the following Thursday on November 9th. Instead, that was the day that we buried my brother. The first days after losing William were the most traumatic and painful days of my life. The pain was deep, physical, and paralyzing. I was sleepless and in shock as hordes of family and friends surrounded us. Without their support, I don't know where my family and I would be today. As the weeks went on, however, I knew I needed a more specialized support system to cope with my grief. I needed a place to direct my many questions and fears. I started by attending a Survivors of Suicide meeting in Center City, hosted by the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention's Philadelphia chapter. The truth was that I was searching for stories like my own to provide answers so I could understand what happened to William and to my family and to me. It was there with the AFSP that I began to see and learn that I was not alone in my crisis and that suicide was not an isolated issue. I truly believe that as a larger society, we shun the very thought of suicide as an appropriate topic of conversation. Instead, it remains unexplained, unexplored, and taboo. And in the cycle of shame and confusion, people are dying. My brother William and so many others did not have to die because suicide is preventable if we can open our minds and our hearts to the conversation and the reality. Instead of turning to anger, I've decided to use these newfound lessons and experiences for the betterment of others and myself. I began seeing a grief counselor named Elaine who helped me understand grief, loss, and death on both a personal and conceptual level. Through counseling and volunteering with the AFSP, I have been able to find a sort of fragile peace in the loss of my brother. I advocate for education above silence and for new life over the fixation of loss. Since William's death, my career in communications has continued to thrive. I have had 2 more children, and I have found fulfillment in the many joyful days of watching them grow. And their youth and life to come reminds me of my days and the memories I still have of my brother, our good times, our childhood, our golden years.
I met you, 14 years ago, through our connection actually with Temple University, and you worked with me for a while, and I guess I've been your mentor and friend for a long time. So I'm always in awe of your strength and courage. It's just, after hearing your story, I'm still sitting here with chills, and so I thank you so much. I mean, it was great that you called me and you said, I saw your show and I'd like to be a part of it, and I think that this was a great message. So thank you.
Thank you
for sharing your story. And I guess you talk about that you needed to go and get some grief. At what point, Garden, did you realize that you needed that grief? Because as I said, I've known you for years, and I remember at that time going to the funeral and not knowing what to do for you. So I guess the question really could be twofold: of when did you know that you needed to get help? And then also, how do you help people to help you? How do you get people to help you?
Well, number one, grief counseling helped me tremendously, and I knew that I needed help probably about 3 or 4 weeks after William died, because that's when the friends and family starts taking a back seat and the grief changes for them. But for us, it just wasn't getting any better. So I sought out a professional grief counselor, and she really helped me understand death as a whole and suicide as a whole. And then after that, I connected with the American Foundation for Suicide Prevention, which has been a lifesaver because they have more answers. They have the information that I was so desperately looking for.
So you were searching, I guess, is what I'm hearing you
Yes.
say. Like, you were searching for answers. Were you feeling that you yourself missed something? Were you feeling guilty? Did you, were you saying, what could I have done differently? What could I have done better?
Yes, suicide is a very complicated grief. There's guilt, there's regret. You play the tape over and over in your mind of the days and the weeks leading up to losing that person from suicide, because it's preventable, and it's not something that is a diagnosable situation where we have 10 weeks to live, 5 weeks to live, 5 years to live. So it was something that the grief was complicated, and there was a lot of shame that you hold on your own back, and a lot of guilt. Absolutely.
Did you create a mantra that helped you get through every single day?
Yes. Well, there was a tape that I created to replace the bad tape. That's what my grief counselor taught me to do. And instead of the tape of the why and what could I have done differently, the tape that I created was just a very simple that I was sorry, that I had ignorance and that I didn't understand what my brother was going through. And that's all that had happened. I didn't understand it. There's so much taboo around suicide. There's so much taboo around mental health and keeping your mental health as important as your physical health. We just don't do that as a society. So I said, over and over again, I would just say I just didn't understand the pain that he was in or what to do with it, and that I would try to change that. I would try to, even if it was a little tiny bit, I would try to make sure that everybody understood what are the warning signs of suicide, how do you get help? And that information is out there, but as a society, we just don't talk about it, and we don't make people understand it.
Do you live differently today than you did when your brother was alive? And now everything. I mean, I'm sure you're different, and your life will never really be quite the same.
Everything's different. It's a new normal, and you hear people say that. And what that means is that there was no memories without my brother. So everything that we started, everything from a birthday, a holiday, was a new experience and a new way to live. So I can't really go to say that I started, that there was a real big change, like physical change or anything like that. It's just knowing that life is very fragile and that we have to listen to people and we have to try to understand what other people are going through and not just try to do what you want to do all the time and go and, get them something hot to eat, or they needed a hot meal, or they needed someone to go do their wash. No, sometimes people need you to stop and listen and hear what's going on in their mind.
I think that's a great piece of advice, to stop and listen, especially in today's world. We're all so quick. I know you and I will talk real quick. We'll be like, okay, go, we got to go by, It's like, what's next? And so what have you done in your life with your children? I know you have 3 beautiful children. What have you done with your children and your sister's children, to really keep your brother's memory alive? I know that you're going out and you're speaking about suicide, but, is there some kind of tradition that you created within your family that honors your brother's memory, or is that something you do every day?
My brother held a lot of gifts close to his heart. Number one was truth. He was a very truthful person, and he did not respect people that were not real. He would always say, keep it real, keep it real. So I've picked pieces of little gifts that he had, and I've tried to make sure that every day I use those gifts. So truth is a gift. If you can be truthful and honest to yourself and to others, that's a gift. So I've done that.
Great. Thank you so much, Garden. Thank you for your insight and your strength and courage and willingness to open up your story to us. I appreciate it, and I know that many others out there watching do too. When we come back, we'll hear from Dr. Thomas Newmark about the effects, warning signs, and coping strategies of suicide for family members and loved ones. Stay tuned. We'll be right back. Please join me in welcoming Thomas Newmark, our expert for today, who is going to shed some light on the effects and warning signs of suicide. Dr. Newmark, a psychiatrist with 39 years of experience and practices in psychiatry, child and adolescent psychiatry, geriatric psychiatry, and neurology, is an active board member of the American Foundation of Suicide Prevention and is committed to making the discussion of suicide an appropriate topic of conversation. Hi, Dr. Newmark.
Hello,
thank you for
Lisa.
joining us today. So you heard Garden's story.
Yes.
She's really brave to come on and talk about it. I guess, one of the things that Garden really talked about a lot was that, there were signs that she didn't see. Could you give us a few warning signs or, some tips if, we think that somebody's in jeopardy, if we have a college roommate or something that we're worried about?
Sure. Most suicides are a result of a mental illness, particularly depression or bipolar disorder. So when a person is severely depressed, withdrawn, showing signs of change in behavior, that certainly is a warning that suicide could be a concern. And probably the biggest concern is when someone actually voices that they feel suicidal, or they feel that the world would be better off without them. If someone expresses that, it's really important to seek out help and encourage that person to seek treatment.
So depression is a word that we hear a lot.
Right.
I think that people use that word a lot. Oh, I'm so depressed. Or, I really, if there's 50 people in the room, how many people do you really believe can you give us a percentage of what a number of people really suffer from actual depression?
Well, depression is actually probably more common than people think. About 10% of the population suffers from depression. When a person suffers from severe clinical depression is when we get quite concerned, and they lose their appetite, lose their sleep, lose their will to live, feel hopeless, helpless. When a person expresses those kinds of concerns, then of course we get very concerned.
Okay. Well, before we started the show today, you and I were talking about college campuses
Right.
and suicide, and we are right in the midst of finals week is coming up pretty soon here, and last semester I was told after the semester ended that one of the students that I had in my class had died by suicide. And I remember feeling like, oh, was there something that I could have done? Did I miss something? So, we talk about loss of appetite or, those types of things, but is there anything else that you could recommend to somebody that's really worried? They might have a roommate or a friend that they say, and that person's not willing to get help. Is there something that person can do to try to get that person help?
I would say the first thing is to continue to communicate with that individual and to make sure that that person knows you're there for them and continue that connection. Usually if someone feels a connection to someone else, ultimately they will seek help. And as a psychiatrist, that's what I attempt to do with my patients, is develop this connection. So at any time when they feel particularly sad or depressed, they know they can call me and I will talk with them.
Do you recommend maybe even having somebody call a family member or a professor, or is there, ways that they should reach out to other people other than just maybe their mom or dad is not the person that they should reach out to. Maybe there's somebody else that they can reach out to.
Sure, absolutely. Anybody that they feel trust in is a person they can reach out to. And it's very important that they reach out to someone who is going to care for them, who is supportive of them. Usually when people feel suicidal, they feel hopeless, they feel isolated, they feel there's nobody there that really cares.
Okay. Hopelessness and feelings, that nobody cares, I think we are all...
Yes.
We all face with at different times of our life, and I think that, and tell me if you think I'm wrong, death by suicide is, you think that that's the answer. That minute, it feels like the answer. And I'm sure, and I'm just as guilty as probably everybody else, some days I go, oh God, if it wasn't for, my kids, I would just, end it all today, because the stress can become so overwhelming of life, and I personally will say to myself, well, tomorrow's another day, and I'm going to sleep, and I'm going to, tomorrow I'll wake up, it'll be a better day, but I think that maybe one of the reasons we as a society are not talking about suicide is because it's so permanent. It's people see it as an answer, but it's not.
It's not an answer at all. And the sad part is that usually suicidal thinking is only very temporary. So that if we can intervene and give people that sense of hope and support, usually the suicidal thoughts will subside. So in that regard, some suicides are definitely preventable.
Okay, so some suicides, in the ones where the people are feeling that they're of loss of hope.
Right, when you can reach out and have that person reconnect and feel that there is a hope and that there's a future.
I think Garden actually gave us a great tip, and I think that we could all use it, whether it's just stop and slow down a little bit and not be so fast and listen. I think that that's a really important skill set that as a society we have all we don't take the importance of what it is to just sit there and listen.
Absolutely, listening is very key, and also if you listen and then you notice some things about a person, like we talked about the change in behavior or the sudden use of alcohol or substances. Those are big warning signs that the person could be in real distress and trouble.
Well, that's challenging too, I think, sometimes, because I myself have a son who's on a college campus, and I'm always worried about the amount of alcohol that is on, and just college kids have accessibility to drugs and alcohol.
Yes.
And it's rampant, so I guess that's we should monitor and know, engage, like how many days a week are they drinking, what are they doing? I mean, in a perfect world, I'd love to see, every college campus have no alcohol, no drugs, and even a smoke-free zone. So.
Absolutely, it's important to monitor substance abuse. One other aspect is important to monitor: when a person feels very depressed and at the same time feels severe anxiety, that's a real warning sign also. That is a very poor combination.
Okay. There's a big day coming up, correct?
Yes.
It's International Survivors of Suicide Day. Can you tell me when that day is and a little bit about it?
I believe it's the 23rd. This day was developed because there's so many survivors of suicide across the world, as Garden mentioned. And most people feel ashamed to talk about suicide. They feel ashamed about what happened and could they have done something different. So this day allows a person to share their grief with other family members, with friends, parents, brothers, and it's a wonderful experience because it allows people to get over the shame of suicide.
Is it a national day or it's a...
Now it's an international day from
Wow.
all over the world.
And people can go to the website to find out more information
Yes.
about that. That's great. Yeah, I remember when Garden was going through, Garden and I have known each other personally and professionally a really long time, and I didn't know what to do to help her. I kept calling and thinking that was enough. Can you give us some tips today that maybe you could give to a survivor of what they can do with this day coming up, or maybe they recently have lost a loved one? What are some things that they could do to overcome some of is there other resources
Well, I think
you can
Garden
recommend?
was very eloquent. I think she did what she could have done to try to save her brother. I think now the main thing is she's trying to overcome, and probably has overcome, a lot of the guilt. So I think all people that have lost someone for suicide should attend these groups and feel comfortable sharing with other people who've had a very similar, unique experience.
Support groups are really important today. I mean, whether
Yes.
it's for suicide, or anything really. Even, I'm sure you can tell me better, are there the support groups for people who are maybe feeling depressed or hopelessness, just to go and talk to somebody? I think that the art of just sitting here and having a conversation one-on-one could be really beneficial for all college kids or anybody who's faced with that.
Support is key. I think support and hope are probably the best antidotes for depression and suicide.
You personally, I asked Garden this question, I'll ask you the same question. Garden, I asked her what her mantra was. Do you have a daily mantra? Because you have a really hard job. You see a lot of, you deal with depression. Do you personally have a mantra that helps you get through every day?
Love is the key, I guess.
It's a great answer. I love that. Love is the key. So, the message that we're trying to talk about for this show, honestly, is not just love, but self-love.
Absolutely.
So I would say that, self-love and self-acceptance. And are there any ideas or, tips that you could give us today for some people who are watching this that might need some help in creating some good, positive self-esteem? Because I do think that, unfortunately, and we're all riddled with a little bit of low self-esteem, no matter how much we try not to. But
absolutely, everybody has doubts about their sense of self. I would just say that there's help available. There are people that care. We're here for everybody. So if there's a student, anybody who has feelings of severe depression or is contemplating suicide, please contact the mental health center, student mental health, contact a friend, do something because we can help.
that's great. Thank you. I think it's interesting that you said we all struggle with, self-esteem
Yes.
issues. I think, and that's a great takeaway as well. I really I meet women all over and men, professional, all over, and I tell them about the show, and it's really, really starting to resonate with people because they're like, wow, we all really do. So I guess the takeaway could really be, self-love.
I think it's a great title, Bounce Back.
Bounce back.
Yes.
Yes, we all want to bounce back. So is there any other advice before we leave today that you'd like to offer the viewers?
Just follow your show.
Follow my show and bounce back. Well, thank you so much for joining us today, Dr. Newmark. We'll be right back. Today's heartfelt story from Garden Logan provides a real-life example and inspiration of how to bounce back after a tragic family loss. Her story reminds us that no matter what we are faced with, we can all overcome pain and adversity that life hands us, even when we least expect it. All of us are faced with different challenges, and not a single one is more or less important. Your personal adversity is your cross to bear, and if it's important to you, it's worth talking about and worth the fight. We created this show to share the message of positive self-acceptance, growth, and love, and to remind every single viewer that they are not alone. The times we live in are fast-paced and overwhelming to most people, let alone to students faced with final exams, social pressure, and their own insecurities. We hope you will embrace our messages of self-positive image, love, and acceptance. And remember that through any adversity, we can all bounce back.